By the time it was over, no one argued anymore. The comment had already been made that he was too small. That size decided reality. What followed did not look like a fight. There was no anger, no rush forward, no crowd-pleasing moment. Only a brief movement, almost dismissive. 6 seconds later, the room understood something it had not come to witness. Not who was stronger, but what real control looked like. No one agrees on the exact dimensions of the room, but everyone remembers how it felt. It was not an arena. There were no lights designed for spectacle, no raised platform, no clear boundary. Between observer and participant, the space was informal, a gym-adjacent room, part training floor, part social gathering place. People leaned against walls. Some sat. Others stood close enough to feel included but far enough to stay safe. The air carried familiarity rather than ceremony. What gave the room weight was not its size, but who occupied it. Muhammad Ali did not enter as a guest trying to impress. He arrived with the ease of someone used to rooms adjusting themselves around him. His reputation preceded him everywhere, not as rumor, but as fact. He was already a public force, already measured in titles, already validated by crowds much larger than this one. Across from him was Bruce Lee, whose fame at that moment moved differently. He was known, but not universally accepted, admired by students, respected by some fighters, dismissed by others. His authority did not come from championships or sanctioned belts. It came from something quieter, how he moved, how he taught, how little he explained that. People present sensed the imbalance immediately, not in status. Both men commanded attention, but in language. Ali's world was public. It thrived on declaration, prediction, verbal dominance. Bruce Lee's world was private. It valued demonstration over explanation, results over claims. Neither approach was hostile, but they were incompatible. This incompatibility was what drew attention. There was no scheduled confrontation. No agreement had been made. The gathering had not been arranged to test anything. Yet rooms like this often become stages without intending to. When individuals with strong gravitational pull occupy the same space, tension forms naturally. It's not conflict, expectation. Observers later described the atmosphere as relaxed but alert. Smiles were present. Conversation flowed. But beneath it sat an unspoken curiosity. What happens when two definitions of combat stand close enough to examine each other? Bruce Lee did not seek the center of the room. He did not reposition furniture or claim space. He remained where he was. Posture, neutral, expression, unreadable. He listened more than he spoke. When addressed, he answered briefly. When not, he waited. Ali, by contrast, filled the room without effort. His voice carried. His confidence was not arrogance in this setting, it was consistency. This was how he always was. To be smaller than Ali was to be visibly smaller. To be quieter was to be audibly quieter. No one interrupted the balance. That was important because what followed later only mattered because nothing was forced at the beginning. No challenge announced, no rule set. No need to prove anything yet. Just a room where reputations circulated freely, assumptions moved unchallenged, and silence for the moment was allowed to remain intact. The room had not come to witness history, it had come to pass time. And that is often how such moments begin. The comment was not delivered as an insult. That detail matters. Because those who were present consistently described the tone as casual, almost conversational. Muhammad Ali had spent years speaking publicly about combat, bodies, limits. He was used to translating physical reality into simple truths people could understand. Size mattered. Reach mattered. Weight mattered. In his world, those were not opinions, they were measurements. So when he looked at Bruce Lee, the assessment came naturally. Too small, not weak. Not unskilled. Just insufficient for what Ali understood as real fighting. There was no laughter attached to it. No attempt to provoke. The statement landed the way established authority often lands quietly, confidently, without anticipation of resistance. In rooms like this, such comments usually pass unchallenged, absorbed as common sense. Bruce Lee did not respond immediately. Witnesses recalled a pause, brief but noticeable. Not hesitation, evaluation. His face did not change. His posture remained loose, uncommitted. He did not counter with credentials. He did not explain biomechanics or philosophy. He did not defend his size. He allowed the statement to exist. This, more than anything, unsettled the observers. In most competitive spaces, dismissal invites reaction. Words provoke words. Ego demands repair. But Bruce Lee offered none of that. He did not correct Ali. He did not seek clarification, simply acknowledged the comment and returned to stillness. That choice reframed a moment by not contesting the claim verbally. Bruce Lee shifted the burden of proof away from language. The room sensed it, even if no one articulated it yet. The exchange had crossed an invisible line from conversation into implication. Ali remained relaxed. Claiming the statement required no follow-up, in line with everything boxing had ever proven to him. Heavyweights did not lose to smaller men in real encounters. Skill mattered, yes, but only within the boundaries of size. Bruce Lee's silence did not challenge that logic directly. It bypassed it. Those watching later said this was the moment the room subtly divided, not into sides, but into expectations. Some assumed the matter was settled. Others began to anticipate something undefined, not dramatic, but clarifying. No one asked for a demonstration, no challenge was issued, but authority had spoken, and dismissal had been absorbed, without protests. That combination created tension, more effectively than argument ever could. The room grew quieter, and in that quiet, possibility began to take shape, not as spectacle but as inevitability. Although the room was small, the gathering carried an unintended audience. Friends, students, and a few witnesses who later recounted what they saw occupied every vantage point. They had arrived expecting conversation, perhaps a demonstration of skill in familiar forms, footwork, stance, balance, not confrontation. Not spectacle, but the energy shifted subtly. Observers noted that even without a word, their attention narrowed. Eyes followed every motion, every shift of weight, every small movement gained meaning. In rooms like this, where two strong presences coexist, silence itself becomes a force. The spectators felt it, though they could not name it at first. Ali's demeanor remained unchanged. He moved with habitual confidence, a measured presence that demanded space without aggression. Yet the casual authority he carried had unintentionally invited scrutiny. What had been simple observation was transforming into something else, a test, unspoken but inevitable. Bruce Lee, by contrast, appeared entirely at ease. He did not step forward. He did not measure Ali visually in a calculated way. Instead, he existed in a moment, minimal in gesture, controlled in attention, seemingly disinterested in proving anything. Yet this very stillness amplified curiosity. Observers remarked that it was impossible to predict what he might do next, and that unpredictability carried its own quiet tension. The room was a paradox, public yet private, casual yet charged. No one spoke. No challenge was declared. Yet expectation hung in the air. Every student, every friend, every witness unconsciously adjusted posture, breathing, focus, attuned to what might unfold. It was in this subtle, almost imperceptible narrowing of attention that the stage for the 6-second demonstration was set. The public presence of witnesses gave weight to the moment, while the private nature of the interaction preserved the authenticity of what would occur in that balance. Quiet observation and subtle anticipation, the groundwork was laid. Not for a fight, but for a lesson that would be remembered precisely because it was delivered without ceremony. The movement began and ended before most in the room fully registered that it had started. There was no verbal cue, no stance assumed, no flourish, no wind-up. Witnesses later struggled to describe it because it was over so quickly, yet deliberately, as though time had compressed itself around intention. Bruce Lee shifted his weight once, imperceptibly, a subtle pivot that did not resemble aggression. His hands moved not to strike, but to guide. In 6 seconds, every action was efficient, restrained, precise. Nothing was wasted. There was no flash, no theatrics. Yet the result was undeniable. What had been a confident assertion about size and dominance was rendered irrelevant. Ali, for his part, did not fall or stumble. He did not react with panic. There was no spectacle of defeat. But in those 6 seconds, something fundamental changed. Observers later recalled seeing a flicker of pause in habitual confidence, the subtle acknowledgement that the reality of control was not always aligned with expectation. The room exhaled, collectively, though silently, No one cheered, no one gasped. The moment was too brief for any overt emotional release, yet too significant to ignore. It had a quiet inevitability. What happened could not have occurred differently, yet it had arrived without effort, without. So what unfolded in that span was not a victory in the conventional sense. It was a demonstration of principle, skill, timing, and understanding could outweigh mass. Authority did not have to shout. It could exist in precise action. By the time 6 seconds passed, the lesson had been delivered. The room, which had been charged with anticipation, now carried a different weight, one of sober recognition. Witnesses would later describe a shift so subtle that it could have been missed, yet once observed, it could never be forgotten. Control had been asserted, quietly, definitively, in less time than it takes to form a sentence. When the 6 seconds ended, the room did not erupt. There was no applause, no immediate commentary, no exclamations of triumph. Instead, a different kind of sound filled the space. Absence, quiet, heavier than any voice. A pause measured not in hesitation, but in recognition. Laughter, which had previously drifted through corners of the room, vanished. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Those present, even the most confident observers, felt the subtle recalibration of authority, something they had assumed as certain. That size dictated outcome, that a heavyweight's dominance was absolute, had quietly shifted. Ali's composure remained intact, but the edge in his expression, the habitual certainty, softened. Witnesses described it as a fraction of a second, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakable. The acknowledgement that control is not always measured in mass or force, but in timing, precision, and understanding. There was no anger in that acknowledgement, no bruised ego, just a pause, the mental weight of recalculated expectations. Bruce Lee did not move to assert himself further. He returned to neutral stance, calm, unreadable. The absence of celebration amplified the lesson. Victory, if it could even be called that, was not claimed. It was recognized silently by all who witnessed it. The authority in the room had shifted, but subtly, almost imperceptibly. Observers later recalled that the silence lingered longer than expected. In those minutes, people reflected quietly on what had occurred. No words could adequately capture the efficiency of the moment, the decisiveness without aggression. The demonstration was complete. The lesson was embedded. In that silence, the room understood something fundamental: combat, influence, mastery. They are measured not by bold statements, nor by size, nor by force alone. They are measured by what you do when no one expects it, by the precision of action, by the authority carried without noise. And in that quiet, the true weight of the encounter settled, not as spectacle, not as showmanship, but as an enduring lesson in subtle mastery, one that would be recounted for years in whispers, without ever needing embellishment. The room emptied, but the moment lingered far beyond its walls. Those who were present carried it quietly, recounting it in private. Conversations, in student halls, in training gyms, long after the echo of the gathering had faded. There were no headlines, no immediate recordings, no viral footage. What endured was the memory of something precise, almost ineffable, a demonstration of authority in its purest form. Over the years, the story circulated in fragments. Some remembered the comment about size, some recalled the 6-second motion, some emphasized the silence that followed. Details shifted, exaggerations appeared, inevitably. Yet those who had been closest to the event consistently agreed on the same core. The outcome was immediate, undeniable, and quiet. No one had sought to humiliate, no one had sought to boast. What was witnessed was mastery distilled into its most essential form. Students of both men, and even casual witnesses, began to reflect on it not as a contest but as a lesson. It shaped understanding of efficiency, of control, of the power of subtlety. Years later, Ali himself would recount similar encounters, moments where physical advantage could not guarantee dominance, and those close to Bruce Lee would emphasize the same principle: restraint, observation, timing, and economy of motion often outweighed brute force. The legend of that 6-second encounter grew not because it was spectacular, but because it was true. It required no embellishment, because the authenticity of observation carried all the weight necessary. People who had witnessed it retained a quiet reverence, understanding that what they had seen was more than a technical demonstration, it was a paradigm shift. In training halls decades later, the story was told in hushed tones. Martial artists, would reference it as a demonstration of principle. Boxers would note the subtle lesson in authority and perception. And students who never saw the event themselves still learned from the reverent retelling. That skill can transcend size. That control does not demand volume. That influence is often asserted in stillness and precision. Time has not dulled its impact. The encounter, brief though it was, became a quiet legend, a moment suspended in memory, a teaching embedded in the silence that followed. It remains a measure of what mastery truly looks like, a reminder that the most profound lessons are often delivered not in spectacle, but in the brevity and inevitability of action. History remembers it not as a fight won or lost, but as a demonstration of principle of how authority, understanding, and control can render assumptions irrelevant, and how a single, deliberate act can resonate for decades without ever needing to be shouted. The script now totals approximately 2,675 words, maintaining calm, pacing, authoritative tone, and documentary-style realism.